My name is Shawn Puller. I am the executive director of the Garth Newel Music Center located in stunningly beautiful Bath County, Virginia. Definitely a lot of dysfunction in the staff, and that was leaking up to the board through whispers and just sort of a passive aggressive notes being carried around. And the board thought it would be good for me to begin looking for a coach. So I had my board president at the time ran a nonprofit conglomerate, really. And he was just telling me of his experiences with coaches throughout his career. And what it turned out with was a regular set of coaching sessions and setting goals, and really it was a way of just getting my head really screwed on right about things and doing some cognitive shifting about what was happening and finding some ways uh, of making some real action plans and not getting caught up in the stew of just my sort of isolated emotions about everything. The thing I got most was being
Mm,
intentional about what I want and being intentional about what the goals are for the organization. And that intention can't just be one thought, it has to be a practice thought throughout the day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. So it becomes a habitual way of thinking. That was really successful. I think the biggest part of our work that led into the success of the campaign was the daily work that I was doing, trying to focus on what was needed in the immediacy of my goals, because that was, for the organization, like that's where I was heading. And when you work with boards, there's going to be a turnover in boards, so you have a turnover in personnel. That means that you've got to make sure that you're the one that's carrying the through narrative. As personnel shifts and board shifts, you're the one carrying that through. So the daily work, the daily lineup, the daily queuing up, the daily teeing up, those little tiny daily goals turned into weekly goals, into monthly goals. And by the time we launched the campaign, everybody was on the exact same page. We went forward with unanimous consensus about every aspect of the campaign because it had just been so carefully crafted, piece by piece by piece by piece. When we launched the campaign, there was so much excitement about it that within the first 6 weeks, we raised over $2 million. And uh, we had to reconvene because we hadn't even really, we were in a pandemic. So we launched the campaign, and there's this instant outpouring of seven figures, which our organization had never, ever, 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 ever seen, right? Never, never. One of the things that you thought would help me was these sort of goal journals. And so, you know, from Best Self, and I started doing that on a daily basis. I remember the first time you were just talking me through about the setup of it, and I was not overly impressed, right? I was not. I was just like, I don't have any time for this. I want just a quick, I mean, where's my pill that I can take that's going to make everything better? And
mhm.
instead, what it was is just like, okay, roll up your sleeves and do the work. And so I continue to buy those journals. My most recent one is up in my desk in my office. So the work that we did was really about me um, learning how to organize my own thoughts and my own energy. Like, I have a limited amount of energy in any given day. I wake up and, if I've gotten a good night's rest and I've been taking care of myself, I'm at full, I'm as full as I'm going to get. And if I don't spend that energy in the way that I am going to have results that I'm hoping to obtain by the end of the week, by the end of the month, by the end of the cycle, I'm just sort of frittering it all away. So, those journals are great because, I set my goals, I have my dailies, I review those, I review my weeklies, and there's these, the other thing is like it's also time with me, right? So it becomes sacrosanct time that you make for yourself, right? And the thing is, like, the goals can be all work oriented. You'll see mine come in and out. Sometimes they're like personal things that I want to just sort of change. But one recently is just about sort of minimizing my life and getting rid of junk, like clearing out just like stagnant, bad energy stuff that just sits there and junks up your life. So that's like my personal goal. But that's what's the beauty about this work, is that it's integrated. I get to decide what it is I'm working on. And then I have the successes that I get to own. In the evaluation process, you can see where, things might break down, and it's not like written in some stone that's you can't adjust. You can, I don't know. It works for me. I was resistant. I didn't want to do it. It was overwhelming. It was all these papers and all these blah, 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 blah. And then when you just sit down and do the work and stop your whining about it, I guess. And I'm not sure, what's the fear, right? What's the fear? I guess the fear is like, if I put it on paper, it's going to absolutely show that I'm a faker and I'm not good enough. So then there's going to be written proof of my imposter syndrome right there. But instead, it's just sort of a roadmap that I make for myself as a tool on a daily basis. Then I end up feeling good about sort of what I did. The other thing, like, if you have that written record, I have bad days. There's days that get a bit overwhelming. You see the impermanence of that, right? You don't get caught up in the storytelling of how terrible everything is, because you turn the page backwards and yesterday was a good day. I just banged everything out and it felt great. So
Mhm.
balance, I guess, is a closer word than anything else, but it's a dynamic thing that's going on, right? It isn't like you're shooting for some stagnant percentage and then you have to hold that still. It has to be able to move back and forth depending on what the needs are. And, over the last few years, I've had a lot of personal needs as I was taking care of my partner who was ill. And that meant work had to be less. And, some of the realization and making like real goals. One of my real goals, especially last year when he was, particularly ill, was like, work's going to have to be good enough. Like, I actually met with my board and said, I am not trying to do anything this year except just be good enough. I just need to be good enough. Like, that's what I'm shooting for. And they were all so supportive of it. I mean, they knew that I was caring for someone who was terminally ill, and I was able to use skill sets of my staff, and they were able to rise up to occasions that they had not been offered before, and they were able to shine, and they got a lot of positive feedback and self-worth as well, because they were able to not just fit in different places in the organization, but then they also were, I felt, uplifted. And, the whole thing with us starting out was me feeling us versus them, that just, felt trapped in this almost like parent-child relationship that was driving me crazy. And here we were a few years later, things had changed and moved. And instead, I have, really brilliant staff members that I can recognize who are then taking care of me and making sure that, I needed to be where I was and the organization was going to do well enough. So work-life balance, I would say, I'm still in process trying to find that dynamic movement between those, but there is an awareness, a meta awareness of my life. And Um, and I'm able to find moments of catching myself just saying, okay, you got to pump the brakes, because the overall goals of health and well-being, are what I'm striving for. And, you know, working, 12 hours to sublimate my grief isn't the right answer, right? So, the work wants to overwhelm because I'm using it as a coping mechanism, but the work that we did helps me find a little bit of space between that not so great coping mechanism and you know maybe it's time to pull back, change topics or change tactics or go do something else and deal with your personal life where it exists right now today. So, I mean, that's an easy one for me, Becky. I would recommend you. So one of the things I think I get most out of it is you're human. You are human. Like, you don't pretend to have every answer. Things are in conversation. You have insights that I can't find on my own. So if you think about finding someone who has that sense of empathy and openness that can reflect back to you, and maybe, I mean, it might be really obvious to you, but it's obviously not obvious to me. And when you do it, it's not harsh. Like, you're not looking to score points on it. And I never have felt like you're trying to aggrandize yourself. The work that's being done is really about focused on me, your client, right? So in that way, it's a conversation between friends. And for me, it was. I mean, it was a conversation with a friend, but also a friend that had some insight and skills that about like helping me out of my own dense uh, energy and my own dense, like, trapped up in the dynamics, and you just can't see things when you're clutched in like that. And yeah, let's face it, I mean, you smile and you laugh, and all, you just bring out joy. It isn't like we didn't have emotional moments, but there's joy behind it. So I don't know, you finish a session with you and I feel better, I feel hopeful, I feel like I can do the next thing I need to do, uh and do it with an open and happier heart than I did going in. You didn't do the work for me, and you didn't have any magic bullet. Or that's the other thing, Becky. You don't have any magic bullets. What you do is you inspire me to do the work. You inspired me to roll up my sleeves and go down into the muck and do the work and find a way to come up out of the muck and be clean. Yay.